She was America's golden girl, flashing that famous smile, flipping her hair, lighting up the screen like no one else could. But behind the camera, Farrah Fawcett was carrying something no one could see. And for nearly 5 decades, Jaclyn Smith stayed quiet. She never shared what really happened on the Charlie's Angels set, or how it changed everything between them. Until now, at 78, Jaclyn has finally decided to speak. About the early days of Charlie's Angels, about Farrah's behavior, how it confused people, how it hurt some, and how it revealed more than anyone realized at the time. What Jaclyn saw behind the scenes wasn't the Farrah fans thought they knew. And what she's just admitted has left fans stunned and heartbroken, because some of it, Farrah never forgave herself for. When Charlie's Angels debuted in 1976, it exploded onto television like lightning in a bottle. The perfect trio, Jaclyn Smith as the elegant Kelly, Kate Jackson as the smart Sabrina, and Farrah Fawcett as the radiant Jill, felt unstoppable. But behind the glamour, the magazine covers, and the Farrah poster that sold in the millions, the reality was far more fragile. And Jaclyn Smith remembers it all. She's always been described as graceful, kind, protective of her castmates. And even now, in her late 70s, she still chooses her words carefully. But when asked recently about those early days with Farrah, her expression changed. Not with anger, but something softer, sadder. Because Farrah, as Jaclyn finally shared, wasn't always okay. She was under enormous pressure, Jaclyn admitted. We all were, but Farrah had the spotlight burning on her the brightest. And I don't think anyone truly understood what that did to her. Off camera, Jaclyn saw the shifts. There were days when Farrah showed up late or quiet. Days when she didn't want to be touched during hair and makeup. Days when she'd stare off between scenes, as if somewhere else entirely. At first, people whispered, "Is she being difficult? Is fame going to her head?" But Jaclyn didn't join in. She watched, she listened, and she began to understand something the public didn't. Farrah wasn't being difficult. She was overwhelmed. The show was a hit, but Farrah had become the hit, and it was swallowing her whole. She wasn't trying to be above anyone, Jaclyn later explained. She was trying to hold herself together. There's one moment Jaclyn never forgot. A day Farrah came to set unusually quiet. She barely said a word to anyone. When they sat between takes, Jaclyn gently asked if she was okay. Farrah hesitated, then looked at her. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I wish none of this had ever happened." Jaclyn never repeated that line until now. She says it still echoes in her mind. It wasn't fame Farrah regretted, but what it cost her. Her privacy, her peace, her voice. And while the press had a field day speculating about diva demands and walkouts, Jaclyn knew the truth. Farrah was cracking under pressure, and no one stopped to ask if she was okay. In fact, when Farrah made the shocking decision to leave the show after just 1 season, most people, including some of the cast, were blindsided. But Jaclyn wasn't. "I knew she was drowning," Jaclyn said softly, "and I didn't blame her for wanting out. That didn't mean it didn't hurt." Her leaving changed the dynamic. It threw the show into chaos. It created tension, some of which lingered for years. But for Jaclyn, the hurt was always mixed with compassion. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone, she said. She was trying to survive. And so Jaclyn made a choice. She stayed silent. She never shared what Farrah had told her, or how broken her friend had sometimes seemed behind the camera. Not in interviews, not in books, not in gossip circles. Because, in her words, it wasn't mine to tell. But now, decades later, with Farrah gone and the legacy of Charlie's Angels being remembered with both admiration and myth, Jaclyn feels ready to open the door, gently, respectfully, because the woman in the feathered hair and dazzling smile was more than a poster. She was human, and Jaclyn saw her. In the public eye, Farrah Fawcett became a phenomenon almost overnight. She was everywhere: talk shows, magazine covers, billboards. Her name was synonymous with beauty. But behind the flawless image, there was something else. A woman suddenly trapped in a machine she never fully signed up for. And Jaclyn Smith saw it happening in real time. "She didn't change," Jaclyn said. The world changed around her and demanded that she keep up. During the first season of Charlie's Angels, production schedules were grueling. 15-hour days weren't uncommon. The writers struggled to keep pace with the network's demands, and the pressure on the Angels to deliver on camera and off was unrelenting. But for Farrah, who had become the unofficial face of the show, it was suffocating. What many fans didn't know was how tightly the studio tried to control her. Farrah couldn't cut her hair, couldn't take certain film roles, couldn't even do interviews without approval. The very fame that elevated her had come with invisible handcuffs, and Jaclyn was one of the few who saw how much it chipped away at her friend. There were moments on set that outsiders misinterpreted. Farrah asking for a break, Farrah skipping a promotional event, Farrah walking off in tears. Rumors flew. Gossip columns labeled her unstable or demanding, but Jaclyn remembered the truth. She wasn't being difficult, she explained. She was being dismissed. She was overwhelmed, and instead of asking how to help her, people turned on her. There's one day Jaclyn still struggles to talk about. A confrontation between Farrah and a producer. Something about a script rewrite. Farrah tried to push back. Not rudely, just honestly, and the room turned cold. Whispers started the second she left, and Jaclyn felt it in her stomach. The beginning of the narrative shifting. She knew it too, Jaclyn said. You could see it on her face. She realized in that moment they were going to make her the problem. Jaclyn kept close to Farrah after that. She offered rides to set, brought coffee, sat with her in her trailer when Farrah was too drained to socialize. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in silence. And in those quiet hours, Farrah revealed more than she ever would to the press. She talked about not recognizing herself anymore, about missing the freedom she had before fame, about feeling like a product instead of a person. Jaclyn listened, and she never judged. She was so sensitive, Jaclyn said. She felt everything deeply. People thought of her as this glowing star, but she was also incredibly fragile. It's what made her so special, but it also made the industry very hard on her. When Farrah finally decided to leave Charlie's Angels, many saw it as a betrayal. Even within the cast, emotions ran high. But Jaclyn never raised her voice, never accused. She understood even if it hurt. She told me, I have to get out before I lose who I am. And how do you argue with that? In the years that followed, Farrah was painted as unreliable, replaced, talked about in past tense. But Jaclyn never participated in any of it. She refused to let the world reduce her friend to a headline or a scandal. She was more than what they wrote, Jaclyn said. She was scared. She was brave. She was trying. And every time she saw Farrah get labeled as difficult, Jaclyn remembered the truth. Farrah wasn't being difficult. She was just trying to hold on to herself. When Farrah Fawcett officially announced she was leaving Charlie's Angels after just one season, Hollywood reacted with disbelief. The show was a phenomenon. She was at the height of her fame. Why walk away now? The headlines made it sound like she was reckless, impulsive. But to Jaclyn Smith, it felt more like watching someone walk out of a burning room. I don't think people realized how much it took out of her, Jaclyn said quietly. She was exhausted, mentally, emotionally. I think she knew that if she didn't step back, something would break. Still, it wasn't an easy decision. Farrah had agonized over it. She worried what people would think. She feared she was letting everyone down, especially Jaclyn and Kate Jackson. The bond between the three women had been real, especially in those early months. They were thrown into a whirlwind together, and Farrah was afraid her exit would destroy that trust. She came to me the night before the announcement, Jaclyn remembered, and she just cried. She kept saying, I don't want you to hate me. And of course I didn't. I couldn't. That goodbye still stays with Jaclyn. She hugged me so tightly, she said, and I knew in that moment it wasn't just about the show. She was saying goodbye to a version of herself she couldn't be anymore. After Farrah left, the dynamic shifted. Cheryl Ladd joined the cast, and Charlie's Angels continued its run with new energy. But something unspoken lingered. a quiet absence that Jaclyn always felt between scenes, a space Farrah had once filled. There were moments when producers discouraged Jaclyn from talking about Farrah publicly. The narrative had moved on, they said. Let the past be the past. But Jaclyn never bought into that. She was my friend, she said. Not just a co-star, not just a face on a poster. She was someone I loved. In private, the two women stayed in touch, though not always consistently. There were gaps, months, even years, when their lives pulled them in different directions. But the connection never faded. Then, years later, when Farrah was diagnosed with cancer, Jaclyn received the call she'd been dreading. And without hesitation, she showed up. She was still so beautiful, Jaclyn said, her voice breaking, even in that hospital bed, even when her body was failing. There was something glowing about her. In those final visits, the two women didn't rehash the old days. They didn't talk about fame or paparazzi or the chaos of 1976. Instead, they held hands. They laughed. They cried. They forgave things that never needed words. And one afternoon, quietly, unexpectedly, Farrah told Jaclyn something she had never said out loud before. She said, "You were the only one who saw me, the only one who didn't treat me like I was broken." Jaclyn didn't respond. She just squeezed Farrah's hand and smiled through tears, because she knew, in that moment, that what they shared went far beyond television. It was something deeper, something that had endured. And when Farrah passed in 2009, Jaclyn grieved not just the loss of a friend, but the loss of someone who had been misunderstood for so long. "I wish the world had seen what I saw," she later said. "I wish they had seen her heart." Because for all the fame and fanfare, Farrah Fawcett had never wanted to be larger than life. She just wanted to be seen, and Jaclyn had done exactly that. To millions of fans, Farrah Fawcett was the poster on the wall, the sun-kissed blonde with the perfect smile and effortless charm. But Jaclyn Smith always saw something else, something the world, in its obsession with perfection, constantly overlooked. She was deeply emotional, Jaclyn recalled. She felt things other people ignored. She noticed kindness and cruelty in equal measure, and she carried it. There were things Farrah never talked about publicly. Private heartbreaks, insecurities, even moments of humiliation. Jaclyn never revealed them either. She protected Farrah, not because she was covering up anything scandalous, but because Farrah's vulnerabilities were sacred. They weren't for public consumption. One such moment happened during the filming of an episode late in the first season. Farrah had just endured a brutal tabloid smear, one that questioned her talent, her marriage, even her character. The production team expected her to show up and smile like nothing happened, and she did. But as the cameras rolled, Jaclyn noticed something different. Farrah's energy had dimmed. Her signature sparkle was gone. Between takes, she slipped away and didn't return for nearly an hour. No one knew where she went except Jaclyn. She found her curled up in the corner of her trailer, knees drawn to her chest, silently weeping. "I sat beside her," Jaclyn said. "I didn't ask questions. I just sat. And eventually," she said, "I can't keep being what they want." It was a confession Jaclyn never forgot. It explained so much of Farrah's behavior during that time. The pulling away, the moments of resistance, the misunderstood tension. Farrah wasn't trying to be rebellious. She was trying to survive under a microscope no human being could withstand. And the more Jaclyn looks back, the more she realizes how brave Farrah truly was. She stood up for herself in ways that cost her everything, Jaclyn said. She walked away from fame. She demanded to be more than a pretty face. She wanted to be taken seriously, and that scared people. In later years, Farrah would go on to prove herself as an actress, most notably in the film The Burning Bed, a role that redefined her career and challenged the industry's expectations of her. But Jaclyn already knew that strength had always been there. It just took the world years to catch up. Even the fans, who adored Farrah for her beauty, didn't always see the full picture. They didn't see the woman who stayed up all night studying her lines, the woman who took care of sick crew members behind the scenes, the woman who once lent her own wardrobe to a struggling actress on set who couldn't afford a proper costume. Jaclyn saw all of it, and she kept it close. "I never told those stories back then," she said. "I didn't think they were mine to tell. But now, I think people deserve to know the woman she really was. Because it wasn't just the fame or the fashion or the hair that defined Farrah Fawcett. It was her resilience, her loyalty, her kindness, even when she had so little left to give. And Jaclyn believes that's the Farrah people need to remember. Not the headlines, not the scandals, but the friend who cried silently in a trailer and still found the strength to walk back on set and deliver a performance no one else could. She was human, Jaclyn said, and she was extraordinary. Long after Charlie's Angels wrapped and long after the magazine covers stopped coming, Jaclyn Smith and Farrah Fawcett remained linked. Not just as former co-stars, but as women forever changed by a whirlwind that neither of them had expected. They were both shaped by that moment in time. One stayed with the show, the other walked away, and yet both carried it with them for the rest of their lives. In the years that followed, Jaclyn quietly built a business empire and raised a family away from the spotlight. Farrah took risk after risk, breaking away from her image to chase roles that challenged her. And while their paths didn't always overlap, there was always a deep, quiet respect between them, unshaken by time, distance, or rumors. "There were long stretches where we didn't talk," Jaclyn admitted. "Life happens, but when we did, it was like no time had passed. There was a trust there, a love, and it never went away." That bond became even more important in Farrah's final years. As her health declined, Jaclyn stayed close, not for the cameras or the headlines, but because she knew what it meant to be there when it mattered most. She didn't want sympathy, Jaclyn said. She wanted honesty. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to feel normal. One of their last conversations wasn't about illness or pain. It was about Charlie's Angels, about the good times, about late-night rehearsals, on-set pranks, and the unfiltered joy they used to share when no one was watching. Farrah told Jaclyn that she sometimes wished they'd all stayed closer after the show, that the fame, the business, the headlines hadn't made things so complicated. "I told her we still had time," Jaclyn said, tears welling. "But we didn't, and that's something I still carry." In the years since Farrah's death, Jaclyn has spoken sparingly about their friendship. But now, at 78, she's found the words, because she believes Farrah deserves more than just nostalgia. "She was brave," Jaclyn said. "She was broken sometimes, sure, but she always stood back up, even when it was hard, even when it hurt." And perhaps what struck Jaclyn most, what still echoes in her heart, was how Farrah kept showing up, even when the world misunderstood her, even when it cost her jobs, relationships, or peace. She showed up. "She made mistakes," Jaclyn acknowledged. "We all did, but she also made magic. And she left behind a legacy people still talk about." Today, Jaclyn carries that legacy with her, not just in interviews or tributes, but in how she chooses to remember her friend. Not as the icon, not as the tragic figure, but as the woman who once looked at her, eyes brimming with tears, and said, "I don't want to be anyone's fantasy. I just want to be myself." And Jaclyn, she saw that woman, loved that woman, and now she's finally sharing what she never did before. Because behind the hair, the fame, the television legacy, Farrah Fawcett was something more. She was real. And for Jaclyn Smith, that's what truly changed everything. Jaclyn Smith never wanted to be the one to tell Farrah Fawcett's story. She believed, deeply, that her friend deserved to speak for herself. But time has passed, and now, the memories she once kept locked away feel less like secrets and more like gifts. Because what Jaclyn is finally revealing isn't a scandal or a headline. It's a portrait, a truth, a glimpse into the soul of a woman the world thought it knew, but never really saw. Farrah wasn't perfect. She had moments of fear, of silence, of breaking under the weight of a system that demanded more than she could give. But she also had strength. She had integrity. And she had someone beside her who saw it all and chose to love her through it. "I didn't speak then," Jaclyn said, "because she never asked me to. But I think now she would want people to understand, to know she was doing her best, that she cared." And perhaps that's the lesson Jaclyn carries now. That some stories, the most personal ones, don't need to be told in the moment. They need to be held, protected, and, when the time is right, shared with tenderness. Because Farrah Fawcett was more than a poster, more than a hairstyle, more than a role. She was a friend. And now, thanks to Jaclyn, we can finally see her for who she truly was. For more emotional stories, check out this video.